What if I told you Hollywood's golden age wasn't only champagne and red carpets, but smoky backrooms, whispered threats, and deals inked in shadows? Some stars didn't just play dangerous roles on screen, they lived them, and when their glitter brushed too close to the underworld, the ending was more noir than fairy tale. These aren't just stories of fame, they're stories of glamour colliding with power. Stay close, because by the end you'll see how stardom itself can become a deadly gamble. Bugsy Siegel, picture a Beverly Hills mansion in the 1940s. The lights glow, the liquor flows, and the guest list reads like a studio roll call of actors, singers, and starlets, all sipping cocktails under the same roof. At the center of it all, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, handsome, charismatic, dangerous. A gangster who moved through Hollywood's golden circles like he owned the place. Siegel wasn't just another mobster, he was style incarnate. Tailored suits, movie star looks, and a taste for the spotlight. Unlike other underworld figures who hid in shadows, Bugsy embraced the cameras. He dated actresses, partied with Cary Grant, and danced with starlets at Cairo's on the Sunset Strip. To Hollywood, he was part gangster, part celebrity, and that made him irresistible. But beneath the charm, Siegel was building an empire. He controlled gambling and rackets in Los Angeles, his influence stretching from studio unions to swanky nightclubs. Did you know his Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas was the first modern casino, turning a dusty desert outpost into the neon kingdom we know today? Siegel dreamed of Las Vegas as Hollywood's playground, a glamorous escape for stars and moguls alike. But his story wasn't destined for a happy ending. The Flamingo spiraled into cost overruns, mob bosses grew impatient, and Bugsy's enemies circled. In June 1947, Siegel sat in his Beverly Hills home, reading the newspaper. Outside the window, a figure raised a rifle. In an instant, Siegel's Hollywood dream was shattered, his life ending in a burst of gunfire that echoed across Beverly Hills. The headlines the next morning stunned the world. Bugsy Siegel, the man who partied with stars and dreamed of desert palaces, was gone. But his legend lived on. Hollywood couldn't resist. His life inspired films, books, and the very mythology of Las Vegas. Bugsy Siegel blurred the line between gangster and celebrity. He wasn't just a criminal, he was Hollywood's own outlaw prince, a man whose charm masked danger and whose dream reshaped the American West. Johnny Stompanato. Hollywood in the 1950s shimmered with glamour, but behind the glitter lay shadows. And in those shadows walked Johnny Stompanato, a man as handsome as a leading man, but whose fame didn't come from the silver screen. It came from scandal, whispers, and a dangerous charm that lured him into Hollywood's brightest circles. Stompanato was a small-time enforcer with big-time style. He dressed sharply, moved smoothly, and slipped into the world of starlets and producers as if he belonged there. Tall, dark, and impossibly polished, he could have been cast as the heavy in any noir picture. Instead, he played his role in real life at Hollywood's hottest nightclubs, on the arms of the city's most famous women. Did you know he had a habit of showing up at premieres and parties uninvited, always managing to charm his way past the velvet ropes? To the tabloids, he was a mystery man with mob ties. To Hollywood insiders, he was trouble in a tuxedo. But his most famous chapter was his turbulent relationship with screen goddess Lana Turner. Their romance was the stuff of tabloid legend, passionate, volatile, impossible to ignore. Photographers caught them at premieres, hand in hand, but behind closed doors, it was a storm. Stompanato's temper was notorious. Turner, adored by millions, found herself entangled with a man who lived in danger. The story reached its tragic climax in 1958. After one violent quarrel in Turner's Beverly Hills home, the night turned fatal. Headlines the next morning screamed across the country. Hollywood gasped. A star was shattered, a lover gone, and the golden dream of the silver screen collided with the dark reality of life off camera. Stompanato's death became one of Hollywood's most infamous scandals, casting a long shadow over Lana Turner's career and forever cementing his place in the city's underworld lore. Johnny Stompanato never starred in a film, but his life played like the darkest noir, a man of good looks and bad choices who stepped too close to the spotlight and was consumed by it. In Hollywood, he was the wrong kind of leading man, the kind you never forget. Sam Giancana. Hollywood loves a villain with style, and in real life, few played the part better than Sam Giancana. He wasn't an actor, but he had the charisma of one, Sharp suits, a sharp tongue, and a knack for stepping into the limelight when most mobsters ran from it. Giancana rose through Chicago's underworld with a mix of charm and ruthlessness, eventually becoming the boss of the Chicago outfit. His reach extended everywhere: gambling, politics, and yes, even Hollywood. He had a taste for stardom, and stars had a taste for him. Did you know he famously carried on a romance with Phyllis McGuire of the McGuire Sisters, one of America's most beloved singing groups? It was a relationship splashed across tabloids' pure Hollywood melodrama, except it was real. He dined with Frank Sinatra, brushed shoulders with starlets, and became the mobster who didn't hide. He leaned into celebrity, smiling for cameras, as if daring the world to call him what he was. But fame has a price. By the 1970s, the government had its eyes firmly on him. Called before a grand jury to testify on organized crime, Giancana looked ready to face his reckoning. Hollywood whispered, Washington watched. The man who had danced in spotlights now faced a stage he couldn't charm his way off of. The curtain fell in 1975. Giancana was at home in his Chicago kitchen, frying up sausage and peppers, his favorite dish. Shots rang out, and the man who once ruled Chicago's rackets collapsed over his stove. Just like that, the star of his own underworld drama was gone. The FBI later called his home a palace of contradictions, half mob fortress, half Hollywood hangout. It was the perfect metaphor for Giancana himself. Part gangster, part showman, never fully belonging to either world. Sam Giancana proved that not all mobsters lived in shadows. Some craved the spotlight, played the part, and ultimately paid for it. His life was the script Hollywood could never write because no studio would dare make it so real. Johnny Rosselli. He was called Handsome Johnny, and in Hollywood, that meant something. With movie star looks, expensive suits, and a voice that could melt ice, Johnny Rosselli didn't need to play a gangster on screen. He lived the role. For decades, he moved between the film studios and the underworld like a man who owned both. Rosselli was no ordinary mobster. He was charming, polite, and eerily well-connected. Born in Italy and raised in Chicago, he worked his way up through the infamous Capone network before heading west in the 1920s. And where did he land? Hollywood, of course. The perfect stage for a man who could make deals disappear with a smile. Did you know Rosselli actually became a film producer? That's right. He worked behind the scenes with studios like 20th Century Fox, helping arrange financing and smoothing business problems no one wanted to talk about. He knew every major player in town. He golfed with actors, lunched with moguls, and whispered to fixers. He wasn't just near the Hollywood power structure, he was part of it. But behind the polished exterior was a man who played a very dangerous game. As the decades rolled on, Rosselli became a key figure linking organized crime, the CIA, and some of the strangest chapters in American history. He was reportedly involved in covert operations during the Cold War, whispers of secret meetings, high-stakes deals, and favors exchanged in dimly lit rooms. By the mid-1970s, Rosselli's life began to unravel. Investigations into organized crime brought him back into the spotlight. He was called before Congress to testify about underworld connections and intelligence operations, topics that made powerful people nervous, very nervous. Then, in August 1976, the mystery turned cinematic. Rosselli disappeared. Weeks later, his body was found floating near Miami, his final chapter as cryptic as his life. The case was never officially solved. Johnny Rosselli's story reads like the final act of a noir thriller. Smooth operator, double life, dramatic exit. He dined with stars, brokered deals between crime and cinema, and left the stage with no curtain call. In the end, Handsome Johnny became what every Hollywood story wants to be: unforgettable, mysterious, and larger than life. Joe Colombo. Joe Colombo wasn't your typical mob boss. Most men in his line of work shunned cameras, hid from microphones, and lived in shadows. Not Colombo. He craved the spotlight. He gave speeches, marched in rallies, and courted reporters like a movie star on a press tour. And it was this hunger for attention that drew him straight into Hollywood's orbit. In the early 1970s, Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather was in production, a film that would become the defining portrait of organized crime. But when Colombo read the script, he saw red. To him, the word mafia was an insult, an attack on Italian Americans everywhere. And Joe Colombo was not going to let Hollywood put it on the big screen without a fight. Through his Italian-American Civil Rights League, Colombo staged protests, applied pressure, and made calls that shook Hollywood's boardrooms. Did you know he personally forced producers to strike the word Mafia entirely from the script? The studio caved, terrified of bad press and worse. Columbo had done what few mob bosses ever dared. He rewrote Hollywood history with a phone call. But Columbo's love of the spotlight was his undoing. In 1971, at one of his own rallies in New York, he took the stage in front of thousands of supporters. As he began his speech, shots rang out. Columbo crumpled, struck down in full view of the cameras he loved so much. He lingered for years in a coma, but his reign was over. The irony? The very movie he tried to suppress went on to immortalize the Mafia more than anything before or since. The Godfather became a masterpiece, and Columbo's interference only added to its legend. Joe Columbo wanted to be remembered as an activist, a leader, maybe even a hero. Instead, he's remembered as the mob boss who stepped into Hollywood's spotlight and couldn't step back out. Jack Whalen. In 1959, Los Angeles, the nightclubs glittered. Neon signs hummed above dark streets, and the biggest stars of the decade, Sinatra, Monroe, Dean Martin, moved through smoky lounges filled with laughter and secrets. Among them was a man who wasn't a movie star, but fit right in with the crowd. Jack Whalen, known to his friends as the Enforcer. Whalen was a towering figure, handsome, well-dressed, always calm. He wasn't an actor, but he looked like one. He moved in Hollywood's highest circles, his name whispered among gamblers, nightclub owners, and underworld figures. His connections stretched from the Sunset Strip to Las Vegas, and he was often seen escorting actresses and starlets around town. Did you know Whalen was especially close to Mickey Cohen, the infamous Los Angeles mobster who practically owned the city's nightlife? Cohen trusted him, some say too much. Whalen became the bridge between the glittering movie scene and the darker side of the city's economy. The casinos, the betting, the private deals that everyone knew about but never mentioned aloud. But by late 1959, tensions were rising. Rival factions were jostling for control of the Los Angeles rackets, and Whalen found himself in the middle of a feud that had nothing to do with Hollywood dreams. On December 2nd, at the trendy Desert nightclub in Sherman Oaks, Jack Whalen was shot during what witnesses described as a heated argument. The details were murky, the witnesses unreliable, and the motives uncertain. Police questioned Mickey Cohen's associates, nightclub owners, and entertainers, but the case twisted itself into silence. No one wanted to talk. Some said it was business gone bad. Others whispered that Whalen had known too much or crossed the wrong man. What's undeniable is this: Jack Whalen's death sent shockwaves through Hollywood's elite. Behind the polite mourning and champagne toasts, there was fear because it proved that the city's most glamorous playground was built on dangerous ground. Jack Whalen lived like a movie star, but died like a secret. His name faded from the papers, buried under decades of rumor and half-truths. But every once in a while, when someone mentions old Los Angeles, his story flickers back to life, like a neon sign blinking in the dark, reminding us that in Hollywood, the real stories rarely make it to the screen. Frankie Carbo. He started in the ring, but not the kind with bright lights and cameras. Frankie Carbo was once a professional boxer, a scrapper from New York's tough neighborhoods. But it wasn't his punches that made him famous. It was his deals. Carbo went from fighter to manager, though everyone in the know understood what that really meant. In the smoky underworld of mid-century America, he was the man who controlled the fight game. By the 1940s, Carbo had become the most powerful, unseen hand in boxing. They called him Mr. Gray because he never needed to raise his voice or even show his face to get what he wanted. Promoters, referees, even champions. If you were in boxing, you were in Frankie's orbit. But boxing wasn't his only stage. Hollywood, with its money and fame, was just another ring. Did you know Carbo had connections to several showbiz figures, including nightclub owners, talent agents, and even musicians? He moved through Los Angeles as easily as he did New York, cutting deals in backrooms while stars smiled for the cameras outside. To the public, he was invisible. To insiders, he was indispensable. Everyone knew who really called the shots, but no one said his name out loud. By the 1950s, the U.S. Senate was investigating corruption in boxing, and Carbo's name surfaced again and again. Testimonies painted him as the shadow boss behind countless championship bouts. It wasn't long before the walls closed in. In 1961, he was convicted of conspiracy and extortion in connection with fight manipulation. The once untouchable puppet master was finally behind bars. But what makes Carbo's story so eerily cinematic isn't just his rise, it's his fall. After years of ruling two worlds, the underworld and the boxing world, he died quietly in 1976. No headlines, no tributes, no crowd. The man who once made fighters and promoters tremble slipped away in silence. Frankie Carbo should have been a movie character, a cross between a sports mogul and a gangster king. Instead, he was real. Too real. His story was buried, whispered about by the old-timers who remembered when one man's nod could change the course of a title fight or a life. In the end, Mr. Gray lived in shadows and died in them too. Danny Green. Danny Green wasn't a movie star, but his life was a pure work of art. The Cleveland gangster styled himself as a Celtic warrior, green suits, flashy cars, and a swagger that screamed larger than life. He clashed with the mob, defied their power, and became a local folk hero. But in 1977, his story ended with an explosion that ripped through his car. The mob finally got him, but Green's legend lived on. Did you know Hollywood later turned his story into Kill the Irishman? Ray Stevenson played him, but the real Green was even more colorful. In a way, Green achieved what most stars only dream of. His legend survived his life. Mickey Cohen's circle. If Los Angeles ever had its own Al Capone, it was Mickey Cohen. But unlike Capone, Cohen loved the limelight. He wasn't just a gangster, he was a star in his own right, parading down Hollywood Boulevard as if it belonged to him. Cohen started small, working as a prizefighter before drifting into the rackets. By the 1940s, he was running Los Angeles for Bugsy Siegel, collecting from bookies, running gambling dens, and making sure the money flowed west to the outfit. But when Siegel's life ended in a storm of bullets in 1947, Cohen stepped into the spotlight literally. Where other mobsters stayed in shadows, Cohen craved attention. He posed for newspapers, gave interviews, and strutted around in custom suits with diamond pinky rings. He became a fixture in Hollywood's nightlife, rubbing elbows with actors, singers, and starlets. To reporters, he was a headline machine. To the public, a mix of menace and celebrity. Did you know Cohen once told a journalist, "I'm just a businessman. I give the people what they want"? To him, gambling and glitz weren't crimes. They were entertainment. And in Los Angeles, entertainment was everything. But Mickey's fame came with a price. Rivals tried to take him down in public shootouts, once even firing machine guns into his house while he ducked behind the furniture. He survived every time, walking away like a movie hero. Each attempt only made him more famous. Eventually, it wasn't bullets that ended Mickey Cohen's run. It was the law. Tax charges sent him to prison, where the glamour of Hollywood nights was replaced by the gray of concrete walls. Yet even behind bars, his legend grew. He emerged years later, still a name, still a story, still Hollywood's gangster prince. Mickey Cohen blurred the line between mobster and movie star. He lived like a celebrity, fought like an outlaw, and made Los Angeles his stage. To this day, his name echoes in noir history, a reminder that in Hollywood, sometimes the most unforgettable stars never stepped in front of a camera. Albert Anastasia stepped into the underworld of the 1940s, and one name strikes fear like no other, Albert Anastasia. To the newspapers, he was the Lord High Executioner. To the streets, he was the man you never wanted to cross. But to Hollywood, Anastasia was something else entirely, a nightmare come to life. He was the gangster whose very name sounded like a movie title and whose legend would later inspire some of cinema's darkest villains. Anastasia's rise was brutal and swift. Born in Italy, he came to America as a young man and quickly carved a path into organized crime. He became the co-founder of Murder, Inc., the mob's enforcement arm, where contracts were carried out with chilling efficiency. While Hollywood was making glamorous gangster pictures, Anastasia was writing the real script in blood and fear. Did you know Anastasia had a fascination with Hollywood movies? He reportedly loved gangster films, watching actors play versions of himself on the silver screen. But unlike Cagney or Bogart, Anastasia wasn't playing tough. He was the real thing. By the 1950s, he sat atop the infamous Gambino crime family, ruling New York with a mix of charisma and terror. But the higher the climb, the sharper the fall. Rivals whispered, allies plotted, and in 1957, Anastasia's reign came to a shocking end. The setting? Not a back alley, but a plush Manhattan barbershop. Anastasia sat in the chair, relaxing as the barber's scissors snipped away. Suddenly, masked gunmen burst in. In a scene that could have been pulled straight from a Warner Brothers crime drama, Anastasia leapt to his feet, fighting his reflection in the mirror, swinging at phantoms as bullets tore through the glass. Moments later, the Lord High Executioner was gone. The image of that barbershop chair, shattered mirrors, and a fallen king of crime became one of the most infamous crime photos in American history. Hollywood couldn't resist. It was replayed, reimagined, and mythologized in films for decades. Albert Anastasia never appeared in a movie, but his legend became part of Hollywood's DNA. He was the gangster who blurred the lines between reality and fiction, the villain so unforgettable that even in death, he seemed like a scene on the silver screen. And there you have it, 10 figures whose lives and deaths blurred the line between Hollywood glamour and underworld shadows. From Bugsy Siegel's Beverly Hills Mansion to Johnny Rosselli's oil drum ending, these stories remind us that fame and danger often drink from the same glass. The question is, were these people victims of power or architects of their own downfalls? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you love these hidden Hollywood secrets, and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay in the shadows.